January 1968. The opening salvos of the most widely debated battle of the Vietnam War. The communist target is an American base called THAN. The defenders are told to dig in. There will be no retreat. As the battle for THAN begins, war explodes in every South Vietnamese city. Tet, the Vietnamese New Year holiday, becomes a spectacular and bloody offensive. In America, television brings home unprecedented war scenes and brings doubt.
I'd also like to get one strike on that right flank to the southwest. At your right flank is that clump of trees, because I think you can get flanked in bad trouble if we don't hit it in there. Over.
By January 68, 2.5 years after American ground troops went to Vietnam, U.S. forces number almost 500,000. Aggressive search and destroy operations have pushed North Vietnamese forces back into border sanctuaries. American field commanders insist their tactics are winning the war. The public is told that the worst is over. But not everyone believes. Defense Secretary Robert McNamara is turning against the war. To replace McNamara, President Lyndon Johnson names a new defense secretary, Clark Clifford. Clifford is a Washington lawyer, a close Johnson associate who at first fully supports the war policy.
In 1967, the reports coming back from Vietnam was that we were finally prevailing. The expression that was being used was that parties could see the light at the end of the tunnel. And returning visitors would comment on when we might be able to get our men back from Vietnam. There was quite a lot of euphoria by the end of 1967. It looked like we were ultimately prevailing and we were nearing the end of this sorry, sorry enterprise.
But in July 67, the North Vietnamese decide on a new strategy. The communist military commander, General Bo Nguyen Giap, prepares to attack South Vietnam cities. His objective, to destroy government structure and American confidence. The switch to an open offensive is a huge risk, and the North Vietnamese proceeded with a peace bid and with the dramatic siege, THAN. December 1967. A large North Vietnamese buildup is observed in the hills around THAN. According to American intelligence, the communist battle plan is to surround, then overwhelm the position. The target, an airstrip on a small plateau, THAN, until now a little-known name in America's 3 years of combat involvement. THAN is located in the remote northwest corner where South Vietnam borders Laos and North Vietnam. To hold THAN, its defenders must control several nearby hills. Key hills like 861 and 881 were held by Marines after intensive combat 7 months earlier. Now these same hills will be pivotal throughout the coming battle. In command, a World War II veteran, Marine Colonel David E. Lowndes. he understands the critical importance to both sides of owning the high ground.
Their plan to take the hills was what I would have done. In other words, if I were on the other side of the fence and my commander said to me, I want that airstrip, you take it, then my first step would be to get you off the hills, to take away your eyes.
Since the mid-1960s, search and destroy operations have been mounted in this northern sector. Khe Sanh is a forward patrol base attempting to block North Vietnamese infiltration routes. The tactics and terrain are the choice of General William Westmoreland.
I was influenced by a desire to fight the enemy away from the populated area. If we could fight them in the hinterlands there, in the rugged, hilly and mountainous area along the Laos border, our fires wouldn't be inhibited by the proximity of civilians.
But now, 3,500 Marines are pinned inside their own barbed wire. They're encircled and outnumbered at least 4 to 1. An operational base becomes a fortress besieged. January 21st. Communist long-range artillery spearheads the opening attack. On this first day, a direct hit on the ammo dump. There will be 11 more weeks of siege.
When people are hit, it comes home very rapidly, and you feel it very deeply. We had a man that caught an artillery round. He had jumped in a hole, and we had a shell come in right into the man's hole. And what they had to send home would probably fit inside of a handkerchief.
They just shelled the hell out of us up there. That was one of the, I guess that was one of the most concentrated bombed areas in the history of warfare. Khe Sanh is only about a quarter mile wide and about half mile long. I think on the first day alone, they dropped 300 rounds in there. It was just a lot of death and destruction up there.
18 Marines die the first day.
Number 1, fire!
For every incoming shell, the Marines shoot several back, but they are the more visible, more concentrated target. The early plight of Khe Sanh's defenders draws press and public attention. It quickly becomes the major war story. Press analyst Peter Braystrup.
It was melodrama at its purest, and no such prolonged confrontation between the Americans and the North Vietnamese had taken place up until that point in the war. So you had visions of Dien Bien Phu in your head, of the surrounded Marines, and you had this unending but never climactic story to cover.
Press comparisons to Dien Bien Phu disturbed the American command. This battle, lost by the French 14 years before, is the symbol of Western military failure in Vietnam. Dien Bien Phu, like Khe Sanh, was an isolated base that had to be supplied by air. Here, too, the communists had a superior encircling force. Artillery bombardment devastated Dien Bien Phu. The victor at Dien Bien Phu, General Bo Nguyen Giap, has planned the siege of Khe Sanh. The similarities are irresistible to the press.
Every new reporter who came up said, try to equate it to Dien Bien Phu. And I kept trying to tell them, and I'll tell you today, that the comparison is not good.
Unlike the French, the American defenders at Khe Sanh heavily outgunned the communists, and the American command is confident it can hold the surrounding hills, which the French did not. At Khe Sanh, the U.S. has total air superiority. But visions of the Dien Bien Phu defeat haunt President Lyndon B. Johnson. He fears America's Vietnam policy may shatter if Khe Sanh falls. The president demands a formal paper from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. signed in blood, as he put it, that Khe Sanh can be held. The White House pressure descends on Westmoreland.
Well, because of the visibility given in the United States by the media, and particularly by television, there was great consternation in Washington. The President and his advisors were very much influenced by television accounts and by press accounts, because they would receive that information before they would our official reports. And Mr. Johnson and his advisors were concerned to the point where they over-evaluated the importance of that battle and the prospect of our being defeated there.
Reflecting national concern over Khe Sanh, the President personally sees off Marine reinforcements.
This is a decisive time in Vietnam. The eyes of the nation and the eyes of the entire world, the eyes of all of history itself, are on that little brave band of defenders who hold the pass at Khe Sanh and the area that is around it.
The reinforcements arrive at the height of the siege. Troop strength is now 6,000, including a battalion of South Vietnamese Rangers.
I made the decision to hold Khe Sanh, and we reinforced it with Marines and with a battalion of Vietnamese Rangers. The force was the minimum force that I thought could be supplied, if necessary, by air.
On orders from Johnson, Westmoreland himself reports daily to the President. His chief logistic concerns are the condition of the runway and getting in supplies by air. Despite his supply problems, Westmoreland decides against opening the highway into the base. His troops are spread too thin. Khe Sanh must continue to depend solely on air supplies. A C-130 spews gasoline from a damaged wing. A mortar round just misses the plane. The airstrip is the main communist target and needs constant repair. Pilots brave anti-aircraft fire to dump their loads over the small target below. For the Marines under siege, their isolation finds words in a soldier's song, composed and sung in Vietnam.
Here am I, away over here, 10,000 miles away from home, away from you, my dear. So homesick and blue, I need so many, many things, but most of all, I need you.
We shared our bunker with large rats that they actually owned Khe Sanh. We was just roomers there. I saw rats in New York, from being from New York, but I never seen them as big as what I saw out there. And they told us how to sleep. Now, that was something unique to me. You took a blanket and you tucked your feet so you're in a cocoon, and you slept like that. If you didn't, the first night there, a guy showed us what would happen. He refused to sleep with his face covered, and a rat jumped and bit a hunk out of his face the very first night. So they never had to tell me about sleeping like that again.
The Marines, an elite attacking force, are under presidential orders to defend. They dig in deeper. As communist shelling continues, the Tet Offensive erupts. Communist forces overrun every major town and city. The Marines at Khe Sanh fear they will be next.
We expected a massive invasion. You know, there were anywhere from 20 to 80,000 people out there. A bunch of us got together and we swore oaths up and down that none of us would ever leave the trench alive, and kind of heroic kind of nonsense, I guess, but we all believed it. We really felt this was it, we're going to all pull our grenades out and light them up in our trench and started waiting.
The beleaguered defenders can only sit and wait anxiously for the expected big push. January 31st, 1968. The communist main offensive is timed to the traditional ceasefire at Tet, the Vietnamese New Year. With U.S. attention fully on the siege of Khe Sanh, the Tet attack is largely unsuspected. In Saigon, guerrillas infiltrate with the pre-holiday traffic. Suddenly, nowhere in Vietnam is safe. Nearly 80,000 troops are committed to the first wave of attacks. Most are southern guerrillas of the National Liberation Front, known as the Viet Cong. The communists strike 100 towns and cities, 36 provincial capitals and 64 district capitals. They attack the American embassy in Saigon and occupy the grounds, capturing world attention. A counterattack forms on the streets outside. American MPs prepare to storm the compound. Heavy fire comes from the assault group of 17 commandos. A gun battle erupts in the embassy grounds, where a commando is barricaded in a frame house. In the fighting, 5 Americans and 15 guerrillas are killed. The communist assault fails militarily, but has strong psychological impact. Ambassador Ellsworth Bunker.
No, I was in my residence when it happened and was wakened about 1 o'clock in the morning, I think, when it started, by the Marines guards. I was surprised that there had been as much infiltration into the city itself as there had been, and surprised that they had gotten into the embassy itself, but felt that the enemy had been repulsed. They'd been pretty well driven out. Things were quiet at that time, and the reports I had from General Westmoreland were that militarily the situation was under control. I felt that this was a relatively small incident. There was a group of sappers that blew a hole in the wall and crawled in, and they were all killed, and the bodies were laying around, and that we shouldn't be deceived by this incident. The enemy had attacked, and he'd attacked in force, and he was going to be defeated. But the press was unbelieving and reported it in an unbelieving sense in general. For several weeks, the character of the press reports was gloom and doom.
The communists attack Saigon's airport, the military headquarters, and the presidential palace. Fighting is heaviest in Cholan, the Chinese suburb where over 1,000 infiltrators are dug in. In Saigon, as elsewhere, half the Vietnamese army is on holiday. In all, some 4,000 Viet Cong have managed to penetrate the inner city. The fighting goes on from street to street for days. Each evening in American living rooms, the war is replayed on television.
The Tet offensive was such a shocking event to the public and to the administration. It was so unexpected. And in the early days of the Tet offensive, it was eminently successful. It looked like the bottom was dropping out.
American armored units move into Saigon to join the battle. 5 American battalions are in action at the end of the first day. In this back alley hunt for snipers, there is little cover and casualties mount. With no sign of communist withdrawal, the Americans call in airstrikes against pockets of infiltrators. Targets are difficult to pinpoint in densely crowded Saigon and Cholang. The city is soon burning, its firemen desperately fighting to contain the damage inflicted by both sides. Civilians are caught in the crossfire. Thousands of citizens are arrested, suspected of aiding the Viet Cong. In Can Tho and My Tho, smaller cities near Saigon, airstrikes leave a devastated landscape. At Ben Tri, an American officer says, "We had to destroy it to save it." For many Americans, this statement becomes a symbol for the many paradoxes of the war. Until now, the war has bypassed the cities. Now, civilians are killed and wounded in unprecedented numbers. The communists make important psychological gains. South Vietnam's chief of pacification, Colonel Nguyen Bay.
It was very successful for the communists to show to the people that the communists can come everywhere, even in the big cities with a big American base or big government base. They can come in and destroy and kill anybody who acts against them.
Dawn, January 31st. In their most concentrated Tet attack, the communists assault Hue. They send 12,000 troops into battle. A major target is the Citadel, a thick-walled fortress once used by Vietnamese emperors. Hue is an important target psychologically. For all Vietnamese, it embodies centuries of history and cultural values. And Hue is militarily vital, halfway on the supply route from Da Nang to the Allied forces near the partition line. For the first time, communist forces become a target for prolonged conventional battle. At Khe Sanh, the communists also become a concentrated target. American air power takes full advantage. Tactical airstrikes soon average 400 a day. The U.S. claims only 2 fighter bombers lost to the fierce anti-aircraft fire. For communist troops caught on the move, the air power is lethal, but they're experts at entrenchment. Those dug in evidently withstand the airstrikes and so prolong the siege. Intelligence analysts working from aerial photographs determine likely North Vietnamese troop routes. And there are new devices to enhance air power. Sensors shaped like small trees are dropped to form a warning system around Khe Sanh. Acoustic sensors pick up sounds of trucks or human voices. Seismic sensors transmit earth vibrations of passing troops.
Roger, Control, we have a JFC 12 change on 604.
Part has been ordered by OMS 12, control number 081.
Down to the south, your alternate target is against troop concentrations. Your primary target is against the Khe Sanh area, where there is a large confirmed troop concentration buildup in storage area.
The toughest punch comes from the B-52s. They take off from Far East bases around the clock.
Okay, pilot 2990, I have a correction of +1. 2990,
990, 0 correction, co-pilot. 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And your plane is travel signal. I have it. Take off the light.
Daily now, 3 bombers are over Khe Sanh every 90 minutes. The rain of bombs, 1,800 tons a day, has a code name, Operation Niagara.
Arc-light raids, B-52 raids. Really tremendous raids. You didn't even see the airplanes. All you saw was the air being ripped apart and the ground thundering underneath you, and you're bouncing in the air. You're not even aware that where the planes could even have been.
February 7th, the Communists attacked the American Special Forces camp at Lang Bay, just 6 miles west of Khe Sanh. Communist tanks appeared for the first time in the Vietnam War, a new alarm for the American High Command. Lang Bay has just 24 American defenders, backed by 900 mountain tribesmen. The defenders desperately call for help from Khe Sanh. The Marines make an agonizing decision. They do not attempt the rescue because of the risk of ambush. Only a handful of Lang Bay's defenders escape. Colonel Lowndes reinforces the hill positions.
Were the hills important? Yes. They were vitally important as far as I'm concerned, because you got to see. You can't fight if you can't see. In other words, if he could come in and get that key terrain and put his observers up there, then the effectiveness of his rocket and mortars and everything else becomes 100% more valuable. And also, it denies us the privilege of spotting on his people that are trying to move in towards the base.
February 8th, 18 days into the siege, Communist reinforcements launched the first daylight attack. They storm up Hill 64, just 500 yards from the Khe Sanh wire. In savage hand-to-hand fighting, the western half of the hill outpost falls. The Marines counterattack and retake the hill. The fate of the Marines is a daily concern of the U.S. public. At Hue, the last Tet battle for the cities becomes another bloody siege. The North Vietnamese capture Hue within 24 hours, then dig in. The Marines begin a bitter counteroffensive. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Christmas.
I can remember a very weird feeling. And we went up Route 1, and we passed, a lot of devastation in that, but nothing. We got into the city, nothing. We were about 2 blocks off of the McVie compound, and then boom, a major ambush hit us. And we literally ran an entire company across the bridge, just at double time. Got into the other side of the bridge, and of course quickly took up position. We were able to drive what was over there off about a square block and then hold it. Frankly, that was probably the worst evening I spent in the city, because I was very scared, and I don't think there was anyone else with us that wasn't.
The Americans struggled to regain Hue, block by block, picking their way across old courtyards and down narrow streets. On February 6th, a week into the offensive, 5 Marine companies recapture some key buildings: the hospital, the jail, and provincial headquarters. More than 100 U.S. Marines are dead. Morale is seriously tested.
Not knowing where they are, that's the worst. Riding around and running the sewers and the gutters, anywhere. Be anywhere. Just hope you can stay alive from day to day. That's what
just want to go back home and go to school. That's about it.
You lost any friends?
Quite a few. We lost one the other day. Whole thing stinks, really.
After 10 days, the communists still hold the main northern sector, the citadel. Now the Marines begin crossing the Perfume River. The main bridges are out, blown up by the communists. 2 Marine companies are ferried across to attack the citadel from the east. The American and South Vietnamese High Command agree that casualties are becoming prohibitive. They decide to bomb the old city, until now spared because of its historical significance. Outside Hue, American reinforcements begin closing in to cut off communist supply lines. As the battle rages, an inspiring moment for the Marines.
Mystically, from somewhere, appears this American flag. Well, first of all, the old gunny looked up and just literally burst into tears. But I think the even greater phenomena was here bullets are still cracking and all sorts of things are going on. And out of the windows of this Capitol building, where Marines are still clearing room by room, and then comes this tremendous cheer, you know, that you can hear over the sounds of the battle and everything else.
In the battle for Hue, the South Vietnamese placed their losses at 400 and claimed 5,000 communist troops killed. The Americans lose 142 Marines. Another 857 are seriously wounded. Among them, Lieutenant Colonel Christmas.
And I let them lay me down, but this is something I'll take with me all of my life. The mortars started to come in, and there was nothing I could do. I couldn't move, and the mortars were walking just like that, and I got hit a couple times, but then on top of me, my radio operator and my gunnery sergeant just dove on top of me and laid on top of me as these mortars, you know, went through. And again, I took a few more wounds. Fortunately, they weren't wounded, but I will take that with me all my life.
There is only the old fort, the citadel, left to reoccupy. Supporting the advance, tanks fire point blank at the walls and garden of the citadel. The Marines seized the southeast gate of the citadel. February 25th, 1968. The battle for Hue is over. South Vietnamese troops celebrate, but the communist forces also claim victory. North Vietnamese diplomat Ha Van La.
Selon notre point de vue, nous considérons que la victoire.
We considered the victory of the Tet Offensive to be a strategic one for us.
Quant aux pertes en effectif.
As to the actual losses of human life or material on our side, I don't recall the exact figures, but it was only natural that we did lose men and material. That was the price we had to pay to win this strategic victory.
The shattered, once grand city is a grim monument to what the victory cost. General Westmoreland claims that the war could now have been won.
This was the turning point of the war. It could have been a turning point for success, but it was the turning point for failure. by virtue of the earlier reporting of the war, which was gloom and doom, and which gave the American people the impression that the Americans were being defeated on the battlefield, swayed public opinion to the point that political authority made the decision to withdraw from the battlefield.
At the Khe Sanh base, a direct ground attack is now expected. Day 33 brings a record incoming, 1,300 rounds. At night, the Marines hear the Communists digging toward them. Some trenches come as close as 200 yards. Each day, napalm scorches the trenches. Bad weather and the shelling hamper the aerial supply lifeline, but thousands of tons of fuel, ammo, and food are parachuted in. There's also an efficient but risky ground delivery system. The planes skim the runway while the cargo jettisons. The system also requires courage for those Marines rotating out.
You have to understand that the planes, because the base was constantly being shelled, did not stop and park on a runway. And they would unload what they had by throwing it out the back. And you would wait in a line, and as the plane went by, you would run after it and jump in. And the first plane was a mail plane that I tried to get out on, and I didn't make the plane. And the plane did not make it out. It was just lifting off, and it got blown away at the end of the runway.
Halfway through the siege, after 40 days, only the wounded are regularly getting out.
Some of the guys wanted out bad enough that they would jump in the hole into the trench line and have their feet above the trench line, hoping that they would get a piece of shrapnel to cut their leg or their foot to go home from. They wanted out that bad.
For the American public, the battle conditions and purpose are increasingly questioned. For the Marines, the challenge is to keep up morale however they can. Bad weather continually closes in on Khe Sanh. But zero visibility hardly affects air operations. Ground controllers using radar and computers guide the bombing. This technology is perhaps one decisive factor in terminating the battle. In mid-March, the Marines realize that like a quietly receding tide, the North Vietnamese are leaving Khe Sanh. The time has come to lift the siege. Starting April 1st, helicopter assaults are made against pockets of remaining communist infantry. Within a few days, air cavalry units link up with the defenders. On the ground, lead elements push west, meeting little resistance. Starting April 6th, the relief forces move into Khe Sanh. The 77-day siege is over. The evaluation begins. An officer at Khe Sanh, Max Cleland.
When our relief forces landed within 2 miles of Khe Sanh, we found that the 2 miles between us and the base had been literally leveled by B-52s.
Despite Khe Sanh's relief, the military must still deal with comparisons to Dien Bien Phu.
We had the superior firepower, we had the superior air support, and we had the superior mobility at Khe Sanh. And ultimately, that made the difference.
Although the Dien Bien Phu didn't materialize, the operation was given such visibility in the United States, it did play into the hands of the enemy psychologically. Now, I think it should be recognized that the strategy of the enemy was to defeat us politically at home. I think they were smart enough to realize they could not defeat us on the battlefield.
The Khe Sanh siege turns many Americans against the war. As the battle ends, a Gallup poll shows that 1 in 5 Americans switch from support to opposition.
Peace out! Peace out! Peace out! Everybody! Peace out! Peace out!
In North Vietnam, the public has shown scenes of anti-war unrest in the United States. They are told the war is being won in the South. At Khe Sanh, the Marines claim a body count of 1,600 North Vietnamese, and possibly many more from the airstrikes. Marine losses are given as 205 killed, 800 wounded. But U.S. public opinion questions the cost and results. The Marines held Khe Sanh. Told to abandon it, only the press and public debated, was it worth it?
I'm a Marine. I still am. I'm retired, but I'm a Marine. And Marines have one funny habit, and that is that they do what the hell they're told to do. If the decision is made by people above me that was not required, I don't have any feeling one way. I was told to go there. I was told to stay there. I went there. I stayed there. When they told me to come out, I came out. The same thing with the troops that were there. I did it only because I had the young men that could do it, and after all, they're the ones that really won the Battle of Khe Sanh.
The U.S. command abandons Khe Sanh, and gradually their tactic of search and destroy. Military experts wonder if the North Vietnamese used Khe Sanh as a feint to draw attention away from the Tet Offensive, launched about the same time. President Johnson answers the critics as he presents unit citations to the defenders.
Some have asked what the gallantry of these Marines and airmen accomplished. Why did we choose to pay the price to defend those dreary hills? By pinning down and by decimating 2 North Vietnamese divisions, the few thousand Marines and their gallant South Vietnamese allies prevented those divisions from entering other major battles. I believe that our initiative toward talks with North Vietnam was greatly strengthened by what these men did at Khe Sanh, for they vividly demonstrated to the enemy the utter futility of his attempts to win a military victory in the South.
In the battles of Tet and Khe Sanh, the U.S. military claims complete victory. But the nature of the combat, not its outcome, proves decisive. In Hue alone, the civilian dead number 5,000, half of them allegedly executed by the communists. The war of attrition seems unending and indecisive. The horrific media images of the war continue to haunt Americans. In Saigon after Tet, the police chief publicly executes a captured prisoner. This television war is instantly transmitted to American living rooms. Despite their losses, the communists gain a psychological victory. Public doubts are reinforced by the soldiers, who often question the cost and purpose.
Awful sick of it. I'll be so glad to go home. I don't know. It's the worst area we've been in since I've been in Vietnam.
Do you think it's worth it?
Yeah, I don't know. They say we're fighting for something. I don't know.
Vietnam was the first war fought without news censorship. Former Secretary of State Dean Rusk.
This was the first struggle fought on television in everybody's living room every day. What would have happened in World War II if Guadalcanal and the Anzio beachhead and the Battle of the Bulge or the Dieppe raid were on television and the other side was not doing the same thing? Whether ordinary people can sustain a war effort under that kind of daily hammering is a very large question.
As the 4-week Tet Offensive ends, Clark Clifford takes office. He was named Secretary of Defense before Tet, when he fully supported President Johnson's Vietnam policy. A month of study has changed him.
Well, I swear to you, it was a revelation to me. I spent 4 days, for instance, down in the tank. That's the Situation Room in the Pentagon, where you're in touch with every U.S. location in the world. And I tried to get answers to questions that had been raised. I would ask questions like, how long, in your opinion, you're the military experts, do you think the war will last? I could get no satisfactory answer. Now, if we send 200,000 more men, will that be the end? Or must we send more? Well, we really don't know. Well, are we actually prevailing in the war? Well, it all depends on how you look at it. I could not get sound and solid answers. I finally asked the ultimate question, and that is, what is the plan for the United States to win the war? It was startling to me to find out that we had no military plan to win the war. At the end of this rather lengthy inquiry, I then reported my personal views to President Johnson. I said it was very clear to me that the one course of action that the United States should take is to get out of Vietnam. It was a real loser.
Clifford convinces President Johnson the war shows no sign of ending soon. Vietnam is destroying his presidency. President Johnson bows at the adverse public reaction after Tet. The president who first committed American combat troops now sees Vietnam dividing America. He decides to freeze troop levels, limit the air war, and seek peace, and not seek re-election.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. Tonight I want to speak to you of peace in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. With American sons in the field far away, with America's future under challenge right here at home, with our hopes and the world's hopes for peace and the balance every day, I do not believe that I should devote an hour or a day of my time to any personal partisan causes or to any duties other than the awesome duties of this office, the presidency of your country. Accordingly, I shall not seek and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.